Hello, and welcome to Fearless DIY Music. My name is Tristan Lass, and today I want to talk about power tools. Before I get started, you can accomplish many things with hand tools, and some people prefer to use hand tools for a lot of fine work, and I will be putting out a video, or perhaps a series of videos about all of the different hand tools that I use. But I use a relatively small amount of power tools, and I thought that it would be worth going over what I do have, what I think are the most useful, the ones I reach for the most often, and the ones that are nice to have but only get dragged out every once in a while. So let's get started. Power tools do save time, and they can make a lot of mundane jobs go very quickly. And the one tool that I reach for the most often when I'm working on guitars, building something, building a bench, building a studio console, table or whatever, is my cordless drill. This is just a Black & Decker. It's a cheapo, lightweight drill. I like a lightweight cordless drill for this kind of work because you want to be agile with it. I do everything from breaking down guitars, like a Stratocaster you can break down in about 5 minutes using a drill with the proper bit to take all the screws out because it's held together all with Phillips screws. So I also find that I use this for so many different things that you might think, oh, you'd use a heavier duty tool. My drill press does not get used very often because I can accomplish most jobs with this as long as I'm careful and have a steady hand. And also, I'm just so used to this tool. I've used it so much. So having a cordless drill is just for any sort of DIY project, both in, construction work and also for instruments and, other equipment is just such a handy thing to have. And it's the one that I would say, if you're going to have one thing, it would be a cordless drill. And then we have this guy here. This box contains a Dremel. This is just a run-of-the-mill Dremel. I also have a ridiculous amount of Dremel accessories. These are just the ones that come with the toolbox. I have another toolbox that's just filled with Dremel stuff. Dremels are very useful. They are very precise when used properly. They are also a runaway nightmare tool that can get away from you if you're using improper RPMs, don't know how to hold it or mount it to, there's all sorts of accessories that you can mount on these to turn them into a router, a mini drill press. If you don't know how to use a Dremel very well, practice. Get lots of scrap stuff together and practice with the tool. It can be your best friend, but it can also be your worst enemy. I would say the Dremel would be somewhere in the middle of my list of tools that are absolutely necessary for speeding up different processes in the instrument making process or the modification process. They're handy. They're very handy. But they do require, they have a learning curve. And if you have your RPMs incorrect and you just dive into something, you can really make some huge mistakes. I have done it. And I've been just like, oh my goodness, I had no idea that could happen. And it can. You have to be very careful with them. Like I said, there's a learning curve, and you should take your time, get some scrap wood together, learn how to use all the different accessories. And if you do get the drill press mount or the router mount is super handy for doing small routing work that a full-sized router may just not, maybe too big for. Is an excellent tool, but it can get away from you easily. So be wary of that. All right, I want to move on now, and I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about how much I love this thing. Not too much time, but I'm mainly just going to talk about how much I love it. I have here, this is a 30-inch by 1-inch little sander. You have probably seen these at Home Depot or, at your Harbor Freight store or anywhere. And these little sanders are cheap. This is like a $50 tool. I use this constantly. This little sander for shaping nuts, for shaping saddles, for doing, little wood pieces in a guitar. Like if I have to make a piece to plug a hole or do a repair or restoration job and I need a small piece of wood specially shaped, this can rough those in no time. Once you become zen with one of these little sanders, you will never turn back because it makes life so easy. I can shape things and do things with this tool that when I first purchased it, I'd be like, oh, well, I can just, flat sand things or just do some rough sanding in. I can shape things very, very accurately with this now. And that just comes with time and bonding with the tool. But like I said, these little sanders are just incredible. And I would put it number 2 on my list right behind the drill. So, and I'm going to start kind of moving these out of the way a little bit because I have this table sitting here and we're going to get to that here in a few minutes. Let's move that out of the way. Okay, so I mentioned the Dremel having router capabilities. Well, there also is no substitute for having an actual router. Routers are intimidating. This is a heavy piece of equipment. I mean, I've used this. This is what you would use to run around the edges of your guitar to do binding with the right bits installed. And once, it's another comfort level thing. Once you get comfortable with one of these, you'll never look back. You'll be like, oh, I can do pickup, cavities with this, no problem. Control route cavities, truss rod slots and necks. I use this a lot. If you're going to be actually building instruments or doing heavy mods on instruments, I think that you kind of have to have one of these. There's really no substitute for a really good heavy-duty router, proper bits, and once again, lots of scrap wood to practice on. This is an excellent, excellent tool. Not necessarily for the beginner, not necessarily for somebody who's not planning on going too far. If you're just planning on doing some basic work, I think that the drill and the little sander would, even just for sanding out nuts, shaping nuts, and doing saddles for acoustic guitars and other jobs like that. The little sander also works on metal. So if you want to grind, if you've got, your grub screws inside of your Strat, bridge are sitting too high, you can sit and you can grind those down with that little sander as well. So it's good for metal work too. But I digress, back to the router. This one I put in the middle. It depends on what you're going to do. If you're going all in and going to do some heavy construction work, having a router is huge. There's no substitute for it, really. All right, so let's set that. Actually, I'm going to keep that kind of nearby this table because this table is a router table, but we're not there yet. I want to discuss 3 tools that I do not have on camera. Start with the drill press. I have a drill press. It's a cheap drill press. It's not the greatest, but it's a drill press. It does what a drill press is supposed to do. But it does not have a deep, you can't put like a 2x2 piece of wood into it and get very far. It only has about 6 inches of available space that you can work into. So it's like a standard drill press. So you're expected just to go through and drill your holes. Most of the time you can do side to side. It's good for headstock holes. But I found that when I need to do things like in the center of a guitar body, it's worthless. I can't usually work the body around to get into a dimension where it actually works. Almost all the time, I just go ahead and pick up my cordless drill and I do whatever I need to do, would have done on the drill press. Just using it and a steady hand, really being careful to look at, making sure that I'm going in straight and not at an angle. If you take your time and back out repeatedly and test, you can get pretty dead straight holes with a handheld tool. Now, all of that being said, like I said, the main thing I use that drill press for is I use it for holes in headstocks. Other than that, I don't really have much of a use for it. So unless you're making necks from scratch, you might not even want to worry about a drill press. I kind of put it at the bottom of my tools that I own. I use it the least. It takes up a fair amount of space, and I just really don't use it that much. All right, table saw. This once again goes into, if you're going to be building like, guitar cabinets or making, little work surfaces like this, or like these, all of my workspace over here is, they're benches that I made myself. Having a table saw is huge, just for cutting big straight cuts of relatively large pieces of wood. If you are not going to be doing that or doing guitar construction, because I use my table saw actually to rough in my necks. So I cut my necks out on my table saw. I also cut a groove on the table saw to get my truss rod cavity or slot routed in roughly, and then I go back with my router to finish it. So it's a very useful tool. I put it above the drill press for sure, because you can get by without the drill press almost completely, but there are things that a table saw does that nothing else can do. And if you're planning on doing heavy construction or guitars from scratch, I strongly advise having a table saw. And it doesn't have to be a super nice one. Mine is just a cheapo Ryobi. Probably, it was given to me, it was probably retailed for $129 when it was originally sold. All right, this is a big one. This is a big one I don't pretty much never use. But when I need it, there's nothing else that does what it does. I do have a floor sander. It has the flat surface, big belt flat sanding unit on one side, and it's got a 10-inch disc sander on the other side. This tool is amazing if you're doing guitars from scratch. It can really save you a lot of time, but you can get by with a hand sander or a plane to do a lot of what it does. It's just a very quick way to get some flat surfaces in a hurry. And I have it. I don't use it very often. It is a tool that I can always consider selling, but then I'm like, I'll never buy another one of these, and just having it is kind of nice. I would put it second to last on the list as far as things that you need, unless you're going to be doing a lot of serious woodworking and building. It is really good for like when I was making the neck through body guitar that was featured in a video a little while ago. It was really good for when I sandwich wood together to get everything flat really quickly. So floor sander, nice to have. Do you need it? Probably not. I wouldn't advise getting one unless you're just really unless you run into like 2 or 3 jobs in a row where you're like, man, if I had that, or gee, if I had that, it would really make life easier. And that is it for those tools that are not on camera. Now I'm going to scoot back here, and if you notice, there's this little arm here, and there's a blade sticking out right here, and that is a jigsaw that's sticking out through there. If we lift this up, you can see the jigsaw is screwed in from the top, and its blade is sticking up through the table with this arm on here with these bearings. And what this does is it gives the blade stability. So if I need to cut curves in a piece of wood, rather than using a jigsaw and freehanding where the blade can kind of like warp as you turn and things like that, the way this is set up is it holds the blade stable because you're pressing against the blade, which then goes in between these little bearings, and it holds it stable so you can get clean cuts even on relatively thick pieces of wood. If you're cutting out a guitar body, this type of setup with a jigsaw makes it so much easier to get all your cutaways in there and stuff. So I built this table from scratch. It's just a very simple table. It's just, some legs, a top, cross beams for stability, and then, like I said, I got my jigsaw mounted through the bottom, up through the top with that little arm there to hold the blade stable. This also works for my router so that I have a router table. On this side, there's a hole right here. And there's holes here to screw the router underneath the table so that the bit sticks up through the table. Then you can put guards on either side of it, and you can run your wood over the router bit. And that is just great for getting long runs of straight lines, like for truss rod routes. It's really good. And if you just need to make long straight lines, you have to have a router table. So I did a 2-in-1. This is just a bunch of scrap wood and drilled a couple holes in the top, then some holes for the screws that go into the tools, and you just mount it from underneath, plug it in, turn them on, and you have yourself a router / jigsaw table. If you have larger pieces of material, right now I don't keep my router installed in the table most of the time, but if I had a large piece of wood, I can remove this arm very quickly, as well as the jigsaw, and it's a 2-in-1 table. Super useful, easy to build, very simple to build. Like I said, and mine is short because sometimes I put this up on a bench and work standing, and sometimes I just put it down on the ground and I just sit next to it and I work down low. Well, so that is, and those are all of my power tools. I do not use anything other than those tools. I do not own any other power tools. And I've done everything from building guitars from scratch, to building speaker cabinets, to building all of my furniture in the studio, rack units, all sorts of things. And I've never needed anything beyond that selection of tools. And as I said, there's a number of them that you probably won't ever need. So I just wanted to give you a rundown of my tools, what might be useful for you. If you own no tools whatsoever, you might already, it gives you a little bit of a buyer's guide. If you already have a selection of tools, then you'll know what you have that you should probably be either, if you're not already using them, start using them on guitars and on projects and have some fun with it. All right. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for watching. If you've made it this far in the video, I would appreciate a subscription and a like, maybe a share. Comments are always welcome. Are there any power tools that you own that you think we should all, check out or consider as being crucial to DIY musical projects? Anyway, I hope that you've had a good time watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.